Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. I have Joshua Reid and Alpha Warrior. Oh my God, these guys are blowing up the internet. Oh my God, their shows are like get hundreds of thousands of views now. I'm so proud of you guys. You guys are like revealing so much great info and intel and truth. Wow, wow, you guys are amazing. So this should be an amazing show. We have already, like we just discussed just before the show, what we've been, all three of us have been talking about, and other like Rodriguez and Scott McKay, we said it's coming, and it came today, guys, in DC. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here, brother. Appreciate it.
All right, Josh, I know you're the man with on a mission with this already. You want to talk about the two, unfortunately, National Guard troops that were shot in DC. Critical.
So we were having a conversation earlier about the seditious six. Yep. And this is the senators and congressmen who were former military and intelligence that came out and said, don't obey unlawful orders. And everybody's thinking that, they're telling the military to subvert orders of their commanders. And I said, no. This is a scapegoat narrative. This is psychological warfare. They are setting up the narrative for something that's about to happen. What they're doing right now, and if we have to look at it like this, is what immediately happened after the seditious six. The White House, Trump administration, they immediately doubled down and said, no, you will obey direct orders from the commander-in-chief. Well, this set the precedent. What happens today? You get two National Guard soldiers shot in D.C. The guy looks like a terrorist. That's just my thought. This is probably going to be treated as a terrorist. If we went from ThreatCon Bravo to ThreatCon Charlie with the military, that means that an event happened, a terrorist event happened.
Well, so just so you know on that too, Josh, you had less than a half an hour ago, Mayor DC Browser, however you say your name,
Browser.
Yeah. She come out and confirmed this was a targeted National Guard attack.
Yep. So on the hits of that, the few things that we have to look at is, I was talking to Alpha, I said, we're going to have a false flag operation here. And what it's going to do is it's going to prompt and initiate the Insurrection Act. So they are trying to push Donald Trump into the Insurrection Act. And then this is what you will most likely see happen. You will see an order come down from a battalion commander or somebody in a command control position. And it's going to be, shoot all protesters in Chicago. I'm obviously making this up, but I'm saying this is what potentially could happen. And they could give National Guard troops the order to shoot. And then what happens is they start shooting civilians, Americans. This sparks national outrage. They say the orders came down from President Trump. And then the Democrats come out there and say, I told you, you should have disobeyed those unlawful orders. And now they have everything to hang Donald Trump with, to impeach him, prosecute him, and remove him from office. This is the beginning of a color revolution. And what they're trying to do is spark a civil war, but in the same instance, remove Donald Trump. This is exactly, if we remember this, Brennan, 2014, went in. His financier for the CIA was Eric Ciccamorella. If people remember Eric Ciccamorella, he was the national security asset on the Ukraine phone call, the perfect phone call with Donald Trump and Zelensky, that filed the whistleblower complaint with Vindman. Okay, so Eric Ciccamorella, he funded the Maidan massacre in Ukraine that Brennan operated under the guise of the CIA, because they knew that if they could kill over 100 of the protesters, that this would spark a color revolution and the people to rise up against Yanovich and bring in Poroshenko, which is exactly who they wanted installed. That's exactly what happened. And we are seeing the same inklings happening right now. And in the left, the radical left, they are playing their playbook to a T. They are just checking off the boxes. Yep. And what we have is, I think we got some good people in place. I do. But then we also have some, I believe, infiltration and bad actors in place. We have Susie Wiles, we know, the chief of staff, who is out there putting, withholding information and intelligence from Donald Trump. We know we have John Ratcliffe over the CIA, who's an incompetent fool, who's taking orders, from what I hear, from the Mossad and just feeding Donald Trump bullcrap information. You got Pam Bondi, who's dragging her feet because she doesn't want the establishment to be taken down and their processes and methods of infiltrating organizations and financiers to be known. So she's going to just step on prosecuting these people. So we're in a very critical position here. And I want people to know that Alpha, myself, you, we've all been talking about some type of false flag operation. I've been talking about this for 5 years. I call it the firestorm. And this is what we are seeing right now rising up. We are right at the foot of this. And so this is the warning that everybody out there is that we have to act now.
I have a slight deviation from the theory that Josh has, but they end up in the same end result. And the way I see it as a potential, and actually these either work can be a contingency for these deep state actors. And I kind of see it as in when the Seditious Six went out and did this, they kind of cornered Trump that no matter what moves he makes, it's going to backfire on him. You have the one that Josh this laid out. The other one is we know that they have infiltration. And we got solid information today that we're not talking thousands, but we're talking tens of thousands that have infiltrated. And that number shocked me. I knew it was high. I didn't realize it was going to be that high. So that, that's kind of adjusted my game theory on some of these things too. But if you have these players that are on, whether it be Antifa or whatever, riot side, and we know that you have some of this infiltration into our military, and you put them in a situation of DC, they can control and create the scenario where you have an American, at least optically, an American civilian that's shot at by a military member. And then that brings us right into the conversation that Josh outlaid, where now you're gonna have the Seditious Six say, see, this is what we said would happen. This is what we told you was going to happen. And then again, this leads to the end result, the 25th, an impeachment, something to turn against President Trump on this. At the same time, you have multiple members that are names of notoriety in the Republican Party, whether it's MTG, whether it's Massey, people that have pulled a lot of support, at least optically. A lot would argue that, what it's showing isn't really reflecting what's organic, but nonetheless, because we know mainstream media, the Mockingbird media, that's what they're doing. This is the PSYOP for the PSYOPs. And so I would just tell people is you have to use your judgment and discernment on what you're going to see unfold. And I'll give it back to you, Josh or Mike on this. Mm-hmm. Me and Josh were in Florida about 2 weeks ago now, almost 2 weeks ago. And we had the opportunity to speak with some very important people while we were there. And one of the sets of information that we got prior to us leaving was that the next 6 to 7 weeks were going to be wild. And 2 days after that conference concluded, we got the Clinton Foundation bring up to the surface, which was tied into the Haiti. And we're like, dang, okay, here we go. This is going to be fast. Then we have the Seditious Six. We have the case against Comey being dropped. We have the case against Letitia James being dropped. Letitia should be able to stand on its own merits when it comes back. There's questions surrounding Comey. There's a lot going on right now. And what my concern is, and I think me and Josh kind of talked about this, and this is why we're so shocked when the National Guard incident happened, is we said they are setting up a false flag event right now. Yep. That they're going to do something. And literally, what was it, 2 hours later, Josh, we see the National Guard story, and we're like, okay, they're when you do it on the small scale, why do they do that? Because they're checking the temperature of the court of public opinion. How are people going to respond to this incident? Do we got to push more propaganda, or do we already have people on the edge of outrage? And if we have people already on the edge of outrage, then we can deploy the massive false flag that we have planned.
So we also have Eric Swalwell, I think less than 2 hours ago. He said that he claims U.S. military members have privately told him they are prepared to save us from President Trump. So they're all in. They're coming from every single angle on this.
That's dangerous, Mike. Well,
the FBI should be calling him up and saying, "You need to come talk to us and tell us who told you that."
Yeah.
So it's getting pretty crazy.
Well, then you have the billboards. Did you see these billboards that are going out there?
Oh my God. Who paid for that? I want to know that too.
Right. And the billboards are pointing to a website. When you go to the website, they're telling you to download the Signal app. They're telling you to remain anonymous, use Proton Mail to contact them. And they're looking for military members. They're recruiting directly in the military.
Yeah, it's really getting out of control. And I think it's going to false flag. This is the beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a trying time right now. We knew that at some point in Donald Trump's presidency this year that they were going to wage some type of warfare. We knew that they were going to come out. We knew that they were going to start setting the narrative. And we've been watching this very, very closely. That's one of the reasons why we got this show and it's hot all over the place. We're watching the narrative. We're calling it out. And like literally after our show, a day after our show, all of this stuff is happening. And we're like, here it is. It's coming. And, you know, I want to let people know that there's moves and counter moves. This is game theory at its finest. And I know that some people would argue, well, this isn't 4D or 5T chess. And, you know, I get that. But when you start to look at what is actually being done, it quite literally is. You know, this is unrestricted warfare at its finest. And this is moves and counter moves, whether it's by Trump, the DOD headset, and Dan Kane, General Dan Kane, or whether it's by our enemies, Venezuela, Cuba, you have China, you have the UK, you have MI6, which is the big part of this. I mean, I don't think many people see the shadow hand that is moving around the world. We just had Lara Logan come out with this groundbreaking interview with Ralph and Gary talking about the 2020 election and how this was taken. And they tie in Cuban intelligence, Cuban foreign intelligence services controlling Venezuela and the Cartel de Sols, and how the Cartel de Sols own Smartmatic and how Smartmatic is based in London. And then we find the connection there to Lord Mark Malloch Brown, which was CEO of Smartmatic from 2014 to 2020, but he was also a senior executive at the Open Society Foundations owned by George Soros. Then you go to DNI Tulsi Gabbard's evidence. June 26, 2016, you had this email from Lenny Bernardo of the Open Society Foundations mentioning HRC and Julianne Smith, the foreign policy advisor for the Clinton campaign, talking about how Hillary has gotten on board with producing Russian collusion narrative against Donald Trump. They just don't have any evidence, but they're going to get CrowdStrike and Threat Connect, two cybersecurity companies, to produce it. This is a month later, you have the Alpha Bank modified documents against Donald Trump connecting him to Russian bank accounts. And where did that come from? Well, directly from that email. I mean, this is direct collusion. And so when we start to look at this, is you see George Soros in the midst of all of this. George Soros NGOs. We have the connection back to George Soros in the UK. We have Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who helped China with the Belt and Roads Initiative all throughout Africa, all throughout Latin America, directing funding to Venezuela from China. You have MI6 directly incorporated into all of this. This is about the old guard trying to stay relevant, trying to stay in control and kill and destroy the United States of America and our constitutional republic. And they have immense amounts of resources.
And they're pressed for time because everything that Josh outlined, Trump has strategically been attacking it. He got China to capitulate to the precursors of fentanyl. He's attacked that. He's completely shut down the southern border, so they're not getting human trafficking and narcotics across that way, which allows us to put our eyes on the ports. So the level of confiscations and arrests at the ports has exponentially gone up. So he's attacking all the resources that they need for the funding of all this. And now you get into a point where you're seeing, you know, Ukraine, you have Zelensky and Putin saying, hey, it looks like we got something here that we're willing to sign. Trump saying, hey, I'm going to go out there if it looks like this is the final one. All this puts pressure on the deep state to say they got to move now. And then on top of that, Trump also, he recognizes midterms are only a hop and a skip away with as far as who's going to announce that running, who's not going to run, where the campaign fund's going to go. He's already started doing his endorsements. So all this puts that window of opportunity for either side, how they're going to react, to be somewhere between December and January. I mean, that's the 60-day window that you have right there.
Wow. Now you guys have this new program on Rumble, DEFCON 0, and it's like I said, it's crushing it. You guys are really Badlands Media. You guys are like really crushing it over there. Hundreds of thousands of views. Amazing information. I got wind of it. You know, I've been following you guys on and off wherever you're at, but that really has sparked a lot of interest in people. Where are you guys getting your intel? I know, Josh, you're like an intel and unbelievable guy, and Alpha, your intel ability. I mean, I've done shows with you, and you're like, yeah, this just came out, and this is what this is. I mean, we've done shows where we're like, yeah, this is bullshit, this bullshit. But you guys are like just so ahead of a lot of the stuff. So tell us, you know, what you're seeing. How are you getting this intel, and how is it working for you?
I'll start off and navigate this carefully. One of the funny things is me and Josh, every now and then we'll come across something and we'll make a phone call to each other and we're like, are we talking to the same person? So we'll kind of laugh. And a lot of times it's, there's, no one's giving us classified information. Just want to be, very, very clear about that. But people are seeing, you have very smart people that can go to any of the channels or social media where me and Josh operate, and they can look at, the past, 7 days, 21 days, 90 days, 6 months, and they can kind of derive from that and granted, I'm sure, AI analytics and assessments are in play here. They can kind of see, okay, where's Alpha going? Where's Josh going? And when they're together, their collaboration of thought, where's that take them? And I think what that does is they say, okay, these guys are on the right path. Let's give them some more information on what they're doing here. And what we've noticed is when they provide us some information, they don't tell us, hey, well, sometimes they say, hey, this is, like we were given a specific timeline, the next 6 to 7 weeks, but it's not always like that. Sometimes it's, hey, check this out, or hey, reevaluate your thought here, which then makes us start to do a little bit more research.
Or retract your statement.
Or you were a little off right here on this one, and you might want to go study this manual here. And then we'll go look and we'll be like, that's what we miss.
So Michael, I'll tell you a little story. This is kind of funny, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I was telling this. Sometimes I get dates mixed up, and I get little details just mixed up. And I was talking about this nuclear incident that happened in Minot, North Dakota, when a AGM nuclear warhead was on a B-2 bomber and went across the country, and nobody noticed. And I said the details wrong. I said it was in 2008. It was really in 2007. I said it was a B-52 bomber. It was a B-2 bomber. And one of the people watching the show, they text a few people, and sure enough, the pilot of the plane saw the video.
Wow.
Came back and corrected the record.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I mean, we got some good contacts, and what I'm saying is there's no classified information. We just have people who are understanding what's happening at a higher level than us, guiding us in the right direction.
And I think one thing Joshua agree with me on, and we actually talked about this last night. It's I think it was last night, the day's blend, but we said what people say is important, but what people don't say is also very important. Yes. And what we've noticed is when me and Josh are off on our information, we'll get corrected, and that correction will come pretty fast. So when we do have a theory or we recognize a pattern and we play out that scenario and we're waiting and the correction doesn't come, we're like, okay, so we must be on the right track here.
Yeah. Give you an example of this is the other day on Sunday night, we had a show and we were discussing Susie Wiles' exit, why Susie Wiles needs to go. Alpha brought up an interview he did with Defender of the Republic on X, where she's talking about the story during the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump was adamant this bill gets passed, but there's 13 Republican holdouts. And he calls them up individually. And he's like, why are you not voting on this bill? And they said, they changed the bill, sir. You didn't get our memo? We sent it over. And apparently they sent the memo over and it went to Susie Wiles, chief of staff, and Susie Wiles never gave it to Trump. And I guess he was infuriated by this. And so we came up and we said, Susie Wiles is out the door. The next day, Paul Sperry on X goes out there and says that insiders inside the White House are saying that Susie Wiles is going to be making an exit, that Trump's going to fire her. And I said, well, this means that Dan Scavino is most likely going to be coming in. This is why they put him in charge of all the hiring and firing inside the executive branch. That's the perfect position prior to being chief of staff. And then the next day, the rumor starts circulating that Kash Patel is going to get fired. Well, this is where it got really interesting because Caroline Leavitt comes out there immediately, the press secretary, and says, Kash Patel's not going to get fired. This is fake news. That's not true. Donald Trump doubles down, takes a picture with Kash. He goes out there, gives an interview, says Kash is great. He's doing a great job. This is what they said. They said Kash isn't going to get fired, but they never said anything about Susie Wiles.
Wow.
They just let it marinate.
That's always good when you get, like, the next day, someone repeats what you talk about, because we all do this research and we're all doing a great job. I love it when they come out the next day. Oh yeah, they've confirmed that. But when they don't, like you said, that's a very, very good point. When they don't, when you say something about somebody or something happening and they don't come and dismiss it, ooh, yeah, that's good too. Very nice, guys.
It has been wild, Mike. That's for sure. You know, one of the things that we've been trying to do is, you know, especially when it comes to the Q posts, you know, DEF CON 0 is oriented around Q. And we know that there has been a lot of people that have abused it and used it for, you know, for personal gain. And we know that forget, you know, that's actually the least concern, the people that are grifting off of it. The biggest concern is the formal infiltration into that movement to either, you know, what is the one thing that people use to handicap the Q boards? Oh, you're just sitting around waiting for something to happen, when that has never been the mission of the boards or its intent. But you have people that have infiltrated into that movement to create that, and that's something that's been weaponized to, you know, to pull people away from it or to doubt it. And so one of the things that me and Josh started to recognize was there's a lot of comms happening on X. And so we started having this conversation, you know, privately. We won't go public with something until we're fairly confident in it, or we get it from a really good, credible source. And then we started to recognize, okay, let's watch for this and watch for this. And when the things started checking the boxes, we're like, they're communicating on X.
Yeah,
this is where it's happening. So then we said, well, let's test this and let's start putting some stuff out there and see what kind of response we get from, you know, certain officials or certain profiles. And then we started to get those confirmations. And then that's when we were confident. We're like, okay, this is the new place of how communications are going to take place. And then Josh found a very interesting post on the boards of why the communications wouldn't go back there, at least not go back there until it's secured. You want to share that part, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, well, so there's a few major players in kind of how this, and I think a little background on kind of what Q was, or at least from my perspective. So I was researching what Q was before Q ever was, if that makes sense. We were understanding conspiracies back in 2008, 2009, why Ron Paul lost the primaries, how they stole it from him, and why Barack Obama came out of nowhere and all of a sudden got elected. I was active duty during that time. I was stationed at the Washington Navy Yard, right? I was a member of the Oath Keepers. I was running events in organizations down in Washington, D.C. for conservatives and for libertarian groups and patriot groups, and we were meeting with congressmen and senators. We were doing 9/11 Truth mock congresses, right? And so I understood it during this time that there was things happening in the military, things happening in DC, and there was a political uprising, that there was a coup happening against the neocons that we had at that point in time. And one of the things that I learned during this time frame is that military secrets, special access programs, USAPs, unacknowledged special access programs, were being stolen. This is why actually I talk about that Ben Spear incident with Minot, North Dakota, with the AGM nuclear warhead, because I was told by a four-star admiral back in the day, in 2009 timeframe. He said, go look at various military incidences and ask yourself, does that seem logical, or is this just what they're reporting to cover up something much bigger? And so that's what I started to do. And I started to see all this alignment that, hey, it appears as if military technology is being stolen. And here's a prime example, and then a connection that is mind-blowing, right? Is that you have Minot, North Dakota, in August of 2008, they send nuclear triggers, so ICBM nuclear triggers from Minot to the Defense Logistics Agency in Utah. 4 boxes. The 4 boxes arrive at the Defense Logistics Agency, classified technology. They take them in, they mislabel them helicopter batteries, and they put them on a shelf with hundreds of other boxes of helicopter batteries. A few months later, those 4 boxes, and only those 4 boxes of helicopter batteries, were shipped off to Taiwan. From what we got from it, from what we gathered, and this isn't in the public discourse, is that those 4 boxes were then interdicted by Taiwanese intelligence on their way over to China. And this opened up an investigation in the military, and they started looking in who allowed this to happen. Well, number one, there's a chain of custody when it leaves Minot. Number 2, there's a chain of custody when it comes into the Defense Logistics Agency. The company that was running the Defense Logistics Agency is a company known as EG&G. people will remember that company's name because that is the same company that Bob Lazar worked for in Area 51. They are the ones that ran the Manhattan Project. They're the ones that built Area 51. They're the ones that ran the Janet flights. So I immediately recognized who this company was, and I'm like, they're not going to be handling, nuclear triggers. They're handling other types of technology. So whatever this was something much bigger. And 10 generals got reprimanded and forced into retirement. One of them was Lieutenant General Kevin Sullivan. Now, what's interesting about that is we always talk about intelligence and legacy families within secret programs. Well, the deep state likes legacy families. They like keeping things in the family. And so Kevin Sullivan adopted a son by the name of Jonathan Sullivan, who just happened to be Jaden X, the filmographer, on January 6th in Washington, D.C. in 2021. Now, that's not a coincidence. It's because they keep things in the family. But what I began to see is this operation that was underway. And I kind of mapped it out over the years. But when you get to the Q part, 2017, what you have is a psychological warfare operation designed to wake up America, focused on Christians, on patriots, focused on conspiracy theorists, focused on veterans, to get them to begin to follow breadcrumbs, to research and to investigate, to get out there and speak out about what they are discovering. It came off the hinges of Pizzagate. And it goes back to one of the things General Flynn said in 2016 is that this was an insurgency, folks. This was irregular warfare at its finest. We have an army of digital soldiers. We have to take back the idea of information. And during that point in time, we had a place when digital technology was starting to expand beyond anything we could ever imagine, where we're able to upload 3-minute videos and people consume memes and 124-character tweets or videos. People are moving away from 60-minute news broadcasts and 30-minute news broadcasts. So we had a different way of consuming information, and we all rose up in this time frame. And what Q did is it unlocked the door to investigative research. It opened up the door for us to follow those breadcrumbs and start getting that public information that was buried, that the news media, the mainstream media, would never touch, and begin putting together this puzzle. And it all culminated till after 2020, when the election was stolen, to where we became the media. We are the media now. We are the face figures that people go to for their news. And what are we doing? We are putting it all together. And we got Q to thank for that, because that was the purpose of it. And so when I start to look at other aspects of it, it's a proxy board of communication. It's over 4,000, almost 5,000 posts where you can go in there and you can utilize timestamps, you can use time notes, you can use various different words, anything that has a contextual reference frame for a tweet, and you can send that out on your X profile, and now you can communicate with another person just the way that spies did in Germany, US spies did in Germany, with going out there and throwing communication within a book on a certain page in the library, but giving the signal that the note is in the book in the library by the coffee shop sign being just a little crooked, and only these people know those signals and the signs, and they go in there and they can find the communication, and then they can go decode it, and now they got the information, and it doesn't have to transfer over these types of airwaves. And this is what we're seeing with what Q is and was it was a psyop to wake us up, to get us motivated to become the voice of America, to rise up, because there's an aspect of Q called the keystone, and everybody's like, what is the keystone? Is it Ukraine, or is it, what is it?
Hold that thought, Josh, because I want to talk about the other part. And Mike, you understand this too, from when you think about battlefield planning. You have this great apparatus that was just designed that Josh outlined. But how do you get normal everyday Americans there? Not just the people that are operating the dark web, but how do you get, your teachers, your doctors, your cops, your lawyer, how do you get them there? And this is where you think ambush. And I think this is what's going to come to shock people if we ever get the full complete picture in the end. Not all censorship came from the bad guys. Nope. What you saw was, all of a sudden, our voices were getting deplatformed off of these spaces, whether it was X or YouTube. So what was the external Q component doing? It was forcing decentralize. So you had, at the time, Twitter and YouTube. Who were they going after? The main voices, the big voices. But all of a sudden, you saw other voices that were like, well, they don't have a big audience. And so you're forcing people to decentralize where they're going for this information into places like whether it was Gab or Getter or Twitch or wherever it was. And then what did you have there? People that could all of a sudden start having these conversations and look into this information that Josh is talking about. So you had these two things that were running parallel that complemented each other to get us to where we're at now. And the game changer for this is, so the deep state, they rolled with that. They were going with censorship. But then all of a sudden something happened that made them panic. And this is where they made a very big mistake. We got news that this man, this big tech guy, said, I'm going to buy Twitter. And we all know him as Elon. And what the deep state knew at that second was, hold up. Our method of censorship right now has been deplatforming. And so if he takes over Twitter, we're going to lose the ability to deplatform. So now what do? Well, we got to flood the information highways with just overabundance of information. So what this did is it forced them into recruiting people, whether it was Clubhouse or these other apps that weren't necessarily part of like their formal recruitment. These were just people, well, they got a big voice, let's see if we can get them. And it started off with, the jab thing that people were putting in their arms and those conversations. And I've had people that have come forward and say, hey, this is how much money I was offered. This was the narrative that I was told to push. So we know that this is something that legitimately was happening. But what happened was now it forced the counterweight came. And that's where you saw this massive amount of people that weren't big voices, but had the information because of these boards. And with that, I'll get back to you, Josh.
Yeah, and so when you go into the idea of Keystone, it says it right there in the key post that the key is POTUS and military intelligence, and the stone is the people, and that those three combined equal the Keystone, the one that unlocks what America truly is. And what he's trying to tell us is that to take back America, POTUS and the military can't do this on their own. They need the people. And it's not just the support of the people, because our republic was never meant for just us to vote once every 4 years or vote every 2 years and, sit back and go live our lives. Is that we have to be active participants. This is the point of a republic. That, I said this today in an earlier interview. I said, it's very funny how when Budweiser pisses us off or Dick's Sporting Good pisses us off, if we can go out there and we can raise our voices in a unified accord and cancel the shit out of them. But the same people cannot get together and say, Trump, it's time to fire Pam Bondi. Trump, you need to get rid of Susie Wiles. Because here's the thing, if we did in that same type of campaign, it would happen instantaneously. Because that's how this government operates. So if we remember, Trump said, I'm returning the power back to the people. But the question is are the people ready? Because the power comes with great responsibility. And that responsibility is that we have to come in and come together through our commonalities. And we have to lead this government. We have to tell our representatives, our Congress, our Senate, our president, that hell no, this is what we want. Hey, look, I don't care if you think that the Epstein files are a Democrat hoax. I don't think if you believe that there's a nothing burger. I don't give a shit. I want it all released. I want it all unredacted. And I want it yesterday. I want to know all the people that are on that list. I want to know the methods and the uses. I want to see the integrative nature of how Jeffrey Epstein ran the finances for illicit organizations and then funneled that into legitimate finances, laundering money for the billionaires of the world, for the criminal cartel organization known as the CIA, and for basically showing us everything and how it works. That's the main reason why they're not releasing the Epstein files. It has nothing to do with Epstein or the victims. It has nothing to do with the people on the compromise. It has everything to do because it exposes the network of the deep intelligence apparatus, how it moves money, how it influences elections, how it overthrows countries, because that is the truth. But here's the thing is they're trying to protect the system. And you know what? Fuck the system. Stop protecting it. It's time to release it. And if we came out there in the same united accord as we did against Budweiser, it would happen tomorrow.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now the Seditious Six, I was on a roundtable last night with, senior, enlisted senior, officers. All of us were in unison in denouncing the Seditious Six. Now, we've heard that the Seditious Six, were informed by the CIA. So now we're talking that what you're just talking about. John Ratcliffe, he's in the CIA, of course. He was a what was he, director of national intelligence at one time too. So he's got all the insight. So I was like, okay, let's see what he does. I haven't seen anything. I was in the CIA for 11 years, and I know how that operates there. And if nothing's happened, that means it's business as usual. And that's why we're seeing these seditious six and some of these other people that are coming out with a coordinated movement right now to destroy America. What are your thoughts on seditious six, guys?
So, well, one, 2 days ago, I woke up to something that was had me smiling, but the White House had actually reposted my video calling out the seditious six, and
wow.
So
very good.
Yeah, so I was pretty pumped up about that, and the point that I was making in the video is they want, this had nothing to do with illegal orders. Right. What they wanted to do was they wanted to get into the minds of some of these troops that we know probably shouldn't be there, got in there through, Biden's administration. They weren't filtered out because we know Obama got rid of, what was it, 150, 160 some generals or flag officers during his time.
198 constitutional generals right after he won re-election and got inaugurated in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, so just under 200. So we know that lack of leadership is going to allow a lot of people to filter through the cracks that otherwise would have probably just kind of, phase themselves out. And in the absence of that, we know a lot of them have not only stayed, but it's put in a position of rank. We know a lot of rank comes with time of service. And so what they were doing was, they're getting in the heads of those people that whatever ideology you have, you're right. But there's another group of people too, it's just to get them to doubt President Trump. That's what it comes down to, because if you do have a compromise, major or colonel that gives an order, and you're a soldier that doesn't, or a Marine or whatever the case may be, you're a service member that doesn't really understand what the big picture of something that's going on, a lot can happen before you realize we shouldn't be here. And we know this because when we went out to war, you're not at home like the audience watching all the graphics on Fox or CNN, this unit's here, this unit's here, this unit's here, and you can kind of say, oh, we see the push. No. You're part of a platoon or a company that said, hey, we're going to go take Route Sioux, and this is the time frame that we got to do it in. And unless you're the officers at, in headquarters, you don't know what everybody else is doing. So how would you know if you're a part of something bad or nefarious with that lack of information? Well, you're probably going to be participating a long time before you figure that out. And so what they did was they really put this seed of doubt in these troops with all the rhetoric that's going out there. And then on top of that, when we're at the barracks, what's being shown on TV? CNN and Fox. It's Mockingbird media. They're not showing alt media. They're not showing podcasts. So you're just seeing two birds or two wings of the same bird on this Mockingbird media. So you get these troops that are like, well, the court of public opinion doesn't literally look like they're on our side, let alone Trump's side, or some of them are. And that creates hesitation. And I think that they are trying to create all that because something big is coming down the pipeline very shortly. And they want inaction and they want revolt.
Yep. So there's another part here, and that when they called this out, they weren't only just speaking the military. They were speaking the federal law enforcement. They were speaking to the intelligence community. And actually, what is it, today or yesterday or today, we had this leak of the conversation between Lutnick and Zelensky about Zelensky coaching on how to talk to Putin and negotiate this. And this got leaked by someone in the intelligence agency. So here's the thing, is it's already started. It is already began. So what happens when people in the intelligence community think that they're the next Edward Snowden and begin just releasing classified intelligence? Oh, Trump's doing this. Look what's going on here. Oh, this is my thoughts on this. They think that they're being patriots to the country, but they're really hurting national security and they're putting people's lives at risk. I mean, that's the situation that we're in, and you can blame the radical left for this. You can blame those seditious six for this. What happens when you have federal law enforcement that are going on a raid of Tren de Aragua, and that the guy that's backing you up decides, you know what, I'm not following this order when you guys are all making the move, and he doesn't have your back at that point in time, and somebody gets killed. This is the type of stuff that we have to watch out for, because this is now all in play because of what they did. And
we've seen this playbook. This playbook goes all the way back to Obama. And where do we see it? With cops. If you rewind the clock back 30, 40 years, there was respect and appreciation. There was admiration for law enforcement. And then all of a sudden we get into the Obama administration, and you started to see these two communities, law enforcement and the citizenry, that they didn't trust each other. And you had, whether it was the shootings in Dallas, whether it was, Kaepernick taking the knee, whether it was BLM, going through the streets, we want dead cops. And it became accepted. Well, it's part of the First Amendment. It's this. And if cops don't like it, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. We saw in a small window of 8 years that the vast majority of people at a minimum developed distrust of law enforcement. And then from there, you got activism that all of a sudden became dangerous. We were seeing cops in New York sitting in their squad cars get shot in the head, and there wasn't a whole lot of outrage from it, and that goes into, the 4 phases of killing. And when you get at that third phase, which is dehumanization, which we've seen that between whether it was Israel and Palestine or Russia and Ukraine, we've definitely all gone through the dehumanization. Well, the final phase is 4, which is killing. So they already have the playbook for that. And this is what we're going to start seeing with the military. Create doubt within the military itself with its commander in chief. Now, at the same time, create doubt in the community that if military responds, is it something lawful or is it not lawful? Because most civilians don't understand chain of command. They don't understand the rules of engagement and stuff that we have in the military. So at the first instance of something that goes sideways, and maybe this situation, we don't really know the details of this shooting that happened today, but what if this was because there was hesitation on the side of the National Guard, or was it because these National Guard members maybe weren't armed? Like, we don't know yet. But if we end up finding out information that there was hesitation, what happens now because what's probably going to happen to the National Guard members in this area now? They're probably going to be armed if they're not armed. And their rules of engagement
are going to bring in 500 more.
Well, there you go, because now you're increasing the statistical odds of something happening. Yeah. Because now the next National Guard member is going to be like, well, I'm not going to be the one that's going to get shot to the dome on that picture that I saw with, Secret Service trying to attend to this guy, and we see blood coming from his head. That ain't going to be me. So then he pulls the trigger.
That's not good.
And then it's all plastered over the media like we saw with Floyd. It's the same thing we saw with all the BLM stuff, but it's going to be pointed at the military. Why? So this way, any movement that Trump makes with the military is going to be seen as him overstepping the powers of the presidency. And they were trying, and I truly believe that this is what we saw happening in LA. I think that they were trying to test the timing, how much resources, what's the window that Trump will deploy this, what level of use of force is he going to allow the military, the Marines, and the National Guard to execute there, and how much jurisdiction are they going to take over local law enforcement? And I think both sides weren't really trying to show their hands, but I think it was because this was always the plan, what we're about to step into in the next few weeks.
So I got an update on the shooting in DC. You ready for this?
Yeah.
National Guard shooter identified as Ramanullah Lakanawal, 29, of Afghanistan, entered the United States under the Biden administration in 2021. It has begun.
Yep. So let's look at, we've talked about how there's going to be these false flags and eventually war in the big cities. Do you think that Venezuela they know that it's about to get hit, and the cartels, run all the way back to these big cities, and they control the governors and the mayors and all that stuff? Do you think maybe that's one of the reasons why they're trying to push this right now?
So a few things about Venezuela. So did you listen to the Gary Bernstein interview with Lara Logan? I mean, they put out great information.
I saw that, but
yeah.
See it yet.
For a little bit of information for people out there, you have the Cartel del Sols. So the Cartel del Sols is not, their generals don't have stars, they have suns. So the Cartel of the Suns, the head guy is Maduro, and the generals are like the capos, and they run all of the cartels and gangs in that organization. You have Tren de Aragua, which was trained in prison by the Maduro regime with Iranian intelligence. And they had 500 operators of Tren de Aragua that were trained by Iranian intelligence. And then they were the first deployable assets into the United States of America, followed by 5,000 of their army afterwards. You have Margarita Island off the coast of Venezuela, of which since 2011 through congressional testimony has been a haven for Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Iranian Revolutionary Guard. I mean, when we're talking Hezbollah, we're talking about Hezbollah Unit 910. This is what Todd Bensman testified in 2022 in congressional testimony, that was coming over the Texas border in troves, not hundreds, thousands. 5,000 is what they interdicted at the Texas border. They're told by the Biden administration, let them go through. This is trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And where do we put them? We put them in U.S. cities. And so this was just one small part of a larger piece. And so Hamas, Houthis, Iran, you would have Iran's foreign minister who was in Caracas on the night of the 2020 election with Donald Trump, watching with Maduro as Venezuela, Iran, Soros and friends, and the UK, MI6, stole the US election from Donald Trump. So we have this big connection that, and I look at these, or like countries like Venezuela, I look at them as, I call them autonomous zones. It's like Ukraine. Ukraine is being like liberated as an autonomous zone right now by Putin, in my belief, and that Trump and Putin are basically going to split up the resources and tell Zelensky to kind of take a hike. But Venezuela is another autonomous zone. It doesn't have any international oversight. These countries can do anything that they want, and they're very rich, they're very wealthy, and they're very powerful. When the cartel of the Suns, the cartel del Sols, came into power, they seized the $4 trillion of assets. 4 of their top billionaires hold about $2.1 trillion in actual money and capital, and this is what they utilize to fund a lot of these international organizations and operations. You have Cuban Intelligence Agency, which runs a lot of their operations throughout Latin America and throughout Mexico. You have China that came in with the Belt and Roads Initiative all throughout South America, Latin America. They control the Panama Canal. They've been funding the Mexican cartels, supplying them with uniforms and weapons and equipment. Last year, when we heard manpads were coming over the southern border, these were directly from Chinese special forces troops that were operating with the cartels in Mexico that were bringing over resources in the United States of America. And so when we start to look at this, we have to understand that the Biden administration allowing 23 million people into the United States illegally wasn't done just because we love people and we need to diversify our gene pool. It was done because they were preparing for a war. They were bringing their members of their army over our southern border, and they were implementing them. So why did we have 2 million Chinese military-age males? Because that's the cleanup crew. That was part of the deal. China funds a lot of their operations after the color revolution's over, and this is how it would look like. And I know we talked about this with Scott and Nino, is that you would have Hamas and Hezbollah, you have Trinidad and Radwa in a city. You would have 100 of them. And we're talking, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of them in these cities. You only need 100. You only need 100. You break those 100 up into 5 groups of 20. You have an active shooter situation on the south side of the city, which produces an all call. Immediately when the police are on that one side, you take down the 911 communications. The other groups, they go out, they take over communications, they take over power and energy. They go to the police precincts, take over the armory, the National Guard armory, and that state is done. All command and control is lost at that point. And that's only with 100 men. You got tens of thousands in there. And then what happens after that state's taken over? That's when the Chinese military would come in and occupy it. They put people in the prison camps, and now they own that land. And we know this because, I mean, you guys saw combat. I didn't, but we all know this, that if Minneapolis was turned into Fallujah, it would take less than 24 hours to take down that city. It would take 5 years to get it back.
Yep.
That's the scenario that's being brought up.
Insight. This is great, and then Alpha, you can jump in because this is in our kind of realm, combat action. So when I was at before I left the military 25 years ago in SEAL teams, I was working in the intel branch and operations and all that kind of stuff. We already knew that Hamas was coming into South America and infiltrating heavily. 10 years before that, 35 years ago, when I was at SEAL Team 6, we were already discussing going into Venezuela 35 years ago. So we have known about this for a while. We have planned about this for a long time. I think we're coming, obviously, to a head with this. What were your thoughts, Alpha?
One of the easiest things that we can do, because now we're talking about we're talking about war strategy on domestic soil. And that's gonna you're gonna operate differently then, because morale's a weapon. And one of the things that allows us as gunslingers to operate the way we do when we're on foreign ground is because you don't have the concept of worry about your family, because your family's secured, so you can focus on your job. Well, when the war unfolds on U.S. soil, all of a sudden there's a new variable that even our most elite have never had to really deal with. And that's, is things at home as secure as I think it is? And anytime you introduce a variable into the formula of a combat strategy, that just makes everything more dangerous. Now, one of the things that law enforcement can do right now in collaboration with the military, and this is where you're going to need the guys that were prior intel, prior SOF, that are now in law enforcement, need to speak up. If you're in the Department of Corrections, and I know a lot of people in the Department of Corrections watch this show, if you're in the Department of Corrections and you've seen a drop, I'm talking a significant drop in inmate crime, in gang crime, or correspondence in the jails, we would say, well, that's a great thing. If that matches that the fact that you have been proactive, you've been doing enforcement, that you would expect that. Now, if you're being honest with yourselves and you haven't seen operations, task force, if you haven't seen any proactive movement and you're seeing that, you better start asking fucking questions. You better reach out, go from the Department of Corrections, you better reach out onto your gang and your cartel cops that are operating in the streets. And if they tell you they're seeing the same thing and they don't have the proactive measures, let me tell you guys what's really fucking going on. We have known historically, especially with the Southern gangs and the Mexican gangs, whether it's MS-13, whether it's 18th Street, whatever the case may be, we've always understood, well, they answer to the Mexican mafia because we've never had to really dig beyond that. But when you start to look at the Mexican mafia is not the one all control all. Who do they answer to that's in Mexico? Whether it's the Sinaloa cartel or the Michoacana or Juarez, but then where do they answer to? Because it's all, where do the drugs come from? That's where the ultimate power comes. And this brings us all the way back to Colombia. This brings us back to Venezuela. This brings us back to those. Now, if those cartels are saying, hey, the last thing we need is for you guys to be doing at the street level, right? Because they do stuff just like we do in the military. The last thing we need you guys to do is, you know, too much murders, too much robbery, because what you're going to do is you're going to generate your normal law enforcement investigations that are going to start wiretapping things. They're going to start doing surveillance of things. And what we need is we need the most minimal amount of that, because what are we doing? We're actually plotting a color revolution. Whether the street gangs understand that or they get all that, this is the intent of why it is. And so one of the things that law enforcement can do right now is, if you have seen a significant drop in your gang and your cartel crimes, find a way to get in contacts with your federal partners that work in Mexico. Find a way to get in contact with your federal partners that are at Customs and Border Patrol. We know that they have a shitload more guys that are working in Customs and Border Patrol. And this goes into a conversation that me and Josh had a few weeks ago, where there was we're gonna hire 100,000 more. And we know the background process takes a while. And wow, we know that your normal everyday cops can't. But what did that do? That provided camouflage to get military special forces guys to do adjacent style training, because you still got to operate within the confines of the law, but you can expedite training. You can say, hey, this training will suffice for this, and we're going to get you credentialed. And we know that these guys are working at the Border Patrol. We know they're in HSI and CBP. If all these people can find a way to centralize their intelligence, they'll be able to figure out exactly the locations of these color revolutions. Because I don't care how great our DOD intel is, this is not foreign soil. The intel from your street cop is something that is going to be new for everybody. And they need to figure it out now, not when this is actually unfolding, because then it's going to be too late.
Wow, that's fantastic. You got both sides of that fence. You know, you have the military side and the law enforcement side, and you work with gangs and all that kind of stuff. Wow, super amazing insight. Now, Josh, back over to you. So politically, giving all this cover, we have the Seditious Six. You have Mark Kelly, captain in the Navy and astronaut. He's like, how dare Trump, you know, I've served my country. Well, so did Benedict Arnold. So we're seeing the same thing. I look at both of them. I'm like, you're Benedict Arnold currently.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that what we're looking at is the surface level. We see a senator, we see a captain of the United States Navy, a test pilot, an astronaut. But behind the scenes, we see someone who was probably recruited a long time ago into a deep state intelligence apparatus and who's nothing more than a rogue operator. that is facilitating for the deep state. I mean, this goes back all the way to Gabby Gifford, his wife, that was shot in the head. She was a congressman. He was just a naval officer at the time. And then, what happens? His wife, gets shot in the head, and this prompts massive legislation for gun change. And it's like, wow, that just seems to be a false flag. The guy was a veteran who shot her, and he was mentally ill, suffering from PTSD. And we damn well know what they do to our military members who are suffering from various different types of mental illness is they enter them into MK Ultra 2.0. And if we start to follow this all back, I mean, Thomas Crooks, according to the FBI, operated alone. We have Tyler Robinson, the Charlie Kirk assassin, operated alone. We have everybody operated alone. All these lone gunmen, man. I mean, all these school shootings, all just lone gunmen. But then we know that there's operations in the past where the FBI goes in and they recruit them, that they utilize Facebook with various different types of their algorithm to focus and target specific individuals. And then they radicalize them. They throw them in the Discord groups. And then the FBI goes in there and begins prompting them and setting them up and giving them access to various different things. And next thing you know, you got a false flag operation, and the FBI agents that set them up are the same ones busting them and saying that they're lone gunmen. I mean, this is MK Ultra 2.0 when we start talking about these active shooters, all these different people. And here's the thing. It's no different than Mark Kelly. It's no different than a lot of these Democrats. They were groomed to be in this position. I mean, the historical aspect of this, I tell this story often. When you came out of World War II, there's a little known fact that not many people know. So when the United States began Operation Paperclip, they utilized parts of Army intelligence, the first branches of OSS, in Berlin at that time. Now, there's only a few people in the Army that actually spoke German. One sergeant specifically that spoke German was utilized as the main recruiter for Operation Paperclip. His name is incredibly famous, but nobody knows the story about him. This was Sergeant Henry Kissinger.
Wow.
I shit you not. He is the main recruiter for Operation Paperclip. So what happens? You get all of these generals, these scientists, all these people within the Nazi regiment that come over to the United States of America. Well, what are we doing? Are we going to put a German-speaking, white-haired, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed German girl into an American school on a military base right after World War II? That's asinine. You're not going to do that. No, you're going to put them in families, high, powerful families. You're going to put them in public or private schools, right? So they're going to get adopted into these other families. Well, that's how the Fourth Reich infiltrated the United States of America.
Absolutely.
They had these groomed children that go and begin infiltrating these high-class, high-level societies. Like I always talk about LDR, Lynn Forsythe Rothschild, who married into the Rothschild dynasty and is now one of the wealthiest Rothschilds on the planet and runs all of their philanthropy and organizations. Well, here's the thing. She's not a blood Rothschild, but she runs the majority of their organizations. Where does she come from? New Jersey. Her mother was a school teacher. Her father was a military officer. Oh, well, wait a minute. You go to all these other wives that are out there with very similar characteristics, blonde hair, blue eyes, and guess what? Their mothers are school teachers, their fathers are military officers, and it's the same MO, but then you can't find anything on their mother or their father. Why? Because they were most likely spawns directly out of Operation Paperclip. They're the children of these Nazis that came over that were then groomed and put into our society and began moving up the ladders. And instead of being the president of the United States, they become the wife of the president. Instead of being the Secretary of Defense, they're the wife of the Secretary of Defense. And this is their handlers that go in there and ensure that they are well taken care of, that they have all the compromise that they need on these people, and that when they need something done, it's going to get done, or that person is going to take them to the cleaner and scream rape or release their naughty photos of what they did with children in Epstein's Island. This is how this system works, and it's very old, it's very ancient, it's very evil, very satanic, and it's been operating for a very long time. And so when I look at these people like Mark Kelly, I immediately go to that perspective because honestly, I think what we are dealing with is a very, not just a radical ideology. We kind of get confused with that. It's like it's a radical ideology. No, we're talking about a cult, We are talking about a deep, dark, evil, satanic cult that the majority of the people that are in it have no idea that they're even a part of it. But the people that are at the top echelons, the people that are in positions of power, they're capos, the generals that are positioned throughout the world, they know exactly what they're doing. They understand that they're working towards their greater good. And people are like, well, what's their greater good? Well, it's 85% depopulation of the world. It's eugenics. It's modification of the human genome to make us inferior and them superior through technology, through AI integration, through genetic manipulation, increasing their intelligence and their strength to make themselves demigods in the eyes of technology, to make us completely enslaved and inferior underneath them, because that has been their goal since the times of Babylon.
Wow. That's fantastic. So yeah, the political realm is definitely infiltrated and part of the problem. We see the Bush family. I've had Sheila Holm on, and she's basically revealed that the Bush family are the sheriffs of Germany. They grew up in Germany. They were with Martin, all the top guys, that were Germans, and during their time frame. George H.W. Bush was in the German Navy at 16 years old, born in Germany, so he couldn't have been president, but he was. His father, once they changed their names, Prescott Bush, and then George H.W. Bush Sr. Became CIA head, and then the president of the United States. So the infiltration was happening long before Project Paperclip, and it is still ongoing. So uncovering this, understanding this, and taking that system down it's like scaling Mount Everest without oxygen. It's crazy, but this is what we're faced with right now. But what do you think? Are we going to be successful with this, Alpha?
I think we are, and I was looking something Josh said just cued me off to go look at to see if Trump had posted anything. Because we know he's been posting a lot on Truth, but he doesn't do a whole lot on X. And sure enough, a few hours ago, he did post on X, and it was the screenshot from his Truth Social post, and it was at 1:59 my time, so it'd be 4:59 p.m. Eastern time. And this is the post for those that haven't seen it yet. The animal that shot the two National Guardsmen, with both being critically wounded and now in two separate hospitals, is also severely wounded, but regardless, will pay a very steep price. God bless our great National Guard and all of our military and law enforcement. These are truly great people. I, as President of the United States, and everyone associated with the office of the presidency, am with you. Now, I wanted to see, hey, is there any relevance to this timestamp? And I definitely think there is. When I went to the boards to look up 4:59, it has a December 25th date on it, which is right around the corner. But this looks like a operational message. I don't know if I can want me to share this so you guys can see it. Mike, what I'm looking at real quick. Here we go. So you can bring that up when you want. And 4:59, for those that don't really understand the boards, just pulling that off the timestamp. Well, what's it say here? It has 10 and in brackets 10:9. Operational window. And then there's a series of codes there that I'm going to say are for an operator, that your everyday, a non or digital soldier is not going to be able to probably decipher that. So chances are that that's something for an operator. Secured floor is yours. Twitter FW, Twitter kill rogue, and then you have confirm, white. So, and this is reference the shooting that happened with the National Guard. I think he just calmed out to one of the operators that's out there earlier on how to deal with this. And the fact that he took this Truth Social post and he put it to Twitter, and he has Twitter FW_. I think this is the saying, hey, the same way, nuke subs, the way they break codes for confirmation, we know. And this goes back to actually what we talked about last night on DEFCON with Josh. We're talking about signature reduction, the 60,000 army. And one of the things that they learned in this is that you had, and the reason this is important is, even though this is the methodology that they used years ago, you got to look at, well, what would that look like present day with our technology? And what we understand is back then, they just had all these women that went on these different FM and AM frequencies that were either saying song lyrics, reading certain messages that to the normal person here, it had made no sense. to an operator, knowing that if it was posted between a certain window and if it was coming from a certain location, they knew exactly how to code that out. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right here in this message. You're getting the Twitter confirmation, you're getting the operational code, and it's following something that just happened with, especially when you look at the words kill rogue. And who knows if the December 25th date plays into it. But I do think that there is a comm here, which would tell me that Trump's team is probably actively dealing with this beyond what we're just seeing on the surface and what's being reported.
Oh,
Yeah.
undoubtedly.
Yeah, I think that we're about to see a lot of action over the course of the next few days. I mean, the guy that shot these National Guard soldiers was yelling Allah Akbar before he did it. I mean, this was a terrorist event. This is a terrorist event on American soil, and the DOD, the Trump administration, needs to treat it as such, which means an immediate ThreatCon Delta and all military installations around the country, around the world. Military posture needs to be elevated. We need to start activating, I know that we don't want to go this way, but he's got to start thinking about national security directives. He's got to start thinking about continuity of government. He's got to start thinking about the Insurrection Act, because this is where this is going to lead to. This is just one of many. This is one of probably a million radicalized fundamental Islamic terrorists that are in our country that came over in the last 4 years from the Middle East, that's a member of ISIS or ISIL or Hamas or Hezbollah or Taliban. They are here. And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm not trying to, get people to think in fear. I mean, most of us, I think everybody on your audience as well, is well armed. So we're okay. But I want people to understand that there is a direct threat to the United States of America. That I've said from the get-go, these people will never give up power and control, that they will scorch this earth before they ever do. And we are at the scorched earth moment because of the information that just came out over the last few days of the 2020 election fraud, uncovering their whole system of operation, shutting down the whole computer system in Serbia, exposing the Venezuelan network for criminal enterprise, human trafficking, gun trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, all of this, how that black money moves from illicit activity into the financial coffers of investment banks in Switzerland or in London or in the United States on Wall Street. That system is being exposed, and that's their greatest fear, because that is the lifeblood that keeps them going. And so this means for them, it's game time. For them, it is all hands on deck. We are about to have the green light to go, which means that the Trump administration better be ready.
I think before you've seen that green light, if people are looking for markers that are going to show that green light, look for either the firing or reassignment of Ratcliffe and Susie Wiles.
Yep. And Bondi, even Bondi.
Well, I think before you see a move on Bondi or Cash, you got to see a move on Susie Wiles first. Because if you see the move on Susie Wiles, and then all of a sudden you see more activity come out of there, then you can isolate it to, okay, this is what was preventing them. If you make a move on Susie Wiles and things still remain static, then you move to the next tier, you take out Bondi. You take out, and when I say take out, I mean replace, just for the people that want to take things out of context. You fire her or replace her. When you do that, if all of a sudden you see more activity out of the FBI with Cash and Bongino, then you know, okay, it was Bondi that was handcuffing them. If you remove Bondi and you still are not getting activity out of the FBI, well, then you're talking about an entire lineup change that President Trump's going to have to do across his administration. But I think if you start off first with Susie Wiles and Ratcliffe, I think you see those as strong markers that it's go time with that.
Yeah.
Because
now, the FBI
has to do something. Oh, he has to do something right now. With the seditious six, the shots on these two National Guard members, whether he likes the position or not, he has to make a dramatic response to that, and that requires more than just bringing people in for questioning.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it might be this weekend. So when it really kicks off, but it's hard. I don't like to predict, because that's always 99% of the time wrong. But it looks like it's moving in that direction. So we'll see. Regardless, we're moving in that direction. So I'm glad you guys brought up the Muslim extremism. It's throughout America, and Alpha, you and I have fought in those areas. The extremists are the ones that run the show. They completely control everybody else in those countries. Once they get in charge, once they get in power, the people, it could be like 1 or 2%, kind of like what we've seen in America. They control everybody. So what are your guys' thoughts on the Muslims if this kicks in from the extremists?
You know, and this goes back to Obama. They've wanted the religious war or the race war in our country to unfold. They've wanted that. They've seeded all the variables there. They just need a triggering event for that. I think Trump making this move on designating some of the factions of the Muslim Brotherhood, I think that's an indicator that he recognizes how close they are to activating that scenario. And I think what he's doing now is he's tapping into, because here's the thing, if they're designating factions of the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist organizations, that means they have the authority to now monitor them, track the funding, and that's going to take them behind the scenes to stuff that maybe, at least legally, they probably weren't supposed to be monitoring, now that they can monitor. So I think you are going to see that. Abbott making that first move in Texas kind of shows the precedence for that. And again, it's what both sides do. When Abbott did that, what do you think Trump and the administration did? They went to social media, they went to podcasts, and they started to look at the court of public opinion. Are conservatives, MAGA, America First, are they in a position where they can tolerate this? And they got the answer. Okay, now that we got the answer, because Abbott was the test case, let's go and start designating these Muslim factions as that to proceed. It's the same thing the deep state's doing right now with the shot on the National Guard. Like, both sides are doing this. So I think the concern is what we're seeing is you have these officers, and I'm going to err on the side of caution and say probably are tapped into the Muslim Brotherhood. That's speculation on my behalf, that are now cops. And why is that significant? Because when you're a cop, you now have access to very confidential databases, whether it's NLETs, I won't go through all of them, but there's different databases that they can easily go through and see everybody in that county or that state that has weapons. Where are the houses that have guns? They now know, because we have special markers, I'll leave it at that, to designate where officers and very important people live. So this way, when that address populates on your MDC, you know where you're going, because it may change the way you handle that particular call. Well, now if you just gave that to people that are, it's their video that they put out there. We will always be for our community. That's not the oath of a police. That's not the oath of a police officer. Yeah. But they went out and made these videos. So you have to wonder, are they getting that information? And are they feeding it into terrorist cells that now know, like Josh said, if they're going to make a move on somewhere in Minnesota, or a move somewhere in Michigan, or a move somewhere in Austin, they know exactly where the cops and officials live to take them out first. So, but I think Trump making that move, at least that's a hat tip to me, that they're aware where this is going, and I think they're ahead of it. So I don't think they're going to be able to pull off what they want.
Yeah, and I actually made a prediction last night. I said CAIR, CAIR. This is Linda Lassour and all these people, the ones that funded Madani in New York. This is the CAIR PAC that actually funded it. Direct connections back to Soros, by the way. They will be the next ones to be declared a terrorist organization, and that's why I think they went out there with the Muslim Brotherhood and defined certain factions, because what you're seeing is CAIR is actually funded by the Muslim Brotherhood, but this is various factions that are actually providing the funding. Now, going back into it, one of the questions that we never ask, and I think that this is culturally important, is why Islam? Why was Islam chosen for this? And they absolutely were groomed and chosen for this. And it's because of the Muhammad doctrine, right? Muslims have this 1,400 years of history of conquering empires by one person moving into a village. One person moves into the village, they infiltrate. People are like, hey, you're a nice person. Oh, great. Yeah, move in. Oh, another one moved in. Oh, they're awesome. The next thing you know is they completely infiltrated, and all the white people or the black people, they're moving out. And then what do? They intimidate. They replicate and they intimidate. So they replicate, they get their progeny in there, and then they intimidate. This is what you're seeing in London and all throughout the UK right now. Okay? After intimidate, they exterminate. They ensure they take over that land, and they take it over for good. And they start with small towns, they move on the cities, then they move on to entire countries. And within 200 years, they will own this entire country if we allow it to happen. And this is why they chose Muslims as well. There's this cult-like obedience that is brought about by Sharia law, that is brought about by Islam, where you don't get this with cartels and gang members, right? That their biggest fear is death, of what the cartel is going to do to them or their family. With radical Islam, it's about what God's going to do to me if I disobey my Amen, right? So you have this whole different theological, ideological perspective that comes with these, where there's this mass obedience to where the 29-year-old will go and shoot 2 National Guard soldiers point blank in the head, yelling Allah Akbar, and he gets arrested and shot and beat up, and he don't give a shit because he's going to heaven and getting his 99 virgins and 2 goats or whatever it is, right? This is why it is them. And if we slowly allow them to integrate into our society, this is what's going to happen over a long period of time. Now, do I think that we need to take action or we need to be Islamophobic? No, absolutely. I'm not Islamophobic. I know many people who are Muslim. They're actually really great people of the community, but they're not radicalized. They're not people that have had generations of trauma through mass war because of a country in the Middle East that starts with an I, or because of, the military-industrial complex or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, there's an infiltration in the United States of America. It wears many different faces, but there's one single hand that's leading it. And how does the Trump administration deal with this? Going to what Alpha said, people got to remember the legend of Phil Haney. Phil Haney, DHS, Department of Homeland Security founder. He was a DHS whistleblower in 2010 under the Obama administration. He called out the Muslim Brotherhood and the infiltration within our local communities, within our local governments and police forces, and how the Obama administration, through the Department of Homeland Security, destroyed the evidence and wouldn't allow it to be released. He was on the John B. Wells radio show on January 28th, 2021. And he says, John, I'm going to meet with a contact next week. I'm going to have some breaking information. And John says, well, I hope you're not suicidal. Because I'm not suicidal. I have a new girlfriend. Life is great. A week later, died, single gunshot wound to the head in an underpass in California, ruled a freaking suicide. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. We've been warned. And I mean, I don't want to scare people, and I hope that I don't. But we have to understand that there is a threat. There is a direct threat, because us taking back our sovereignty, our freedom, our rights, our liberties, our personhood, our individuality, that's a big, big gambit against a system that was designed to control us.
I have a 41-second clip for you, Mike, if you want to share this. Bridget Gabriel, she's a national security expert. This document, I think she explains it here, but this document is official. This is evidence in a court case, for those, in case she doesn't explain that part.
Understanding the role of the Muslim Brother in North America. The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Arabic word for brothers, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Is this clear? They don't mince words, do they?
She's awesome. Yeah, I love her work. But I've been in the Middle East for most of my career as a SEAL in CIA, almost all of it in CIA, and they don't integrate well at all. They have their own culture, and anyone that's outside of their culture, like we're seeing in London, like you're talking about with the rape gangs, they dehumanize, and they dehumanize everyone that's not Muslim, and they're open game. So we've seen the rape gangs, and you were talking, Josh, about how police forces are infiltrated. They're absolutely infiltrated in London. So this is definitely something we need to be aware of and start to look at very heavily. Muslims as a whole, or like Christians as a whole, or like Jews as a whole, they're good people. But when you have these extremist groups that come in and start to manipulate, like we're seeing, it can turn out really, really bad, because they're dehumanizing and they'll kill, like those. Those are headshots. Looks like on those 2 National Guard. Somebody's trained. So that's one guy. Imagine hundreds of them, it would be devastating.
You had a gentleman that came across the border in Biden's administration. This was caught on video. I think we talked about it too, Josh.
Yeah.
I got it somewhere. I think I got it on my TikTok.
Yeah, okay, you know where I'm going with it then. And they asked, they didn't know his name, or he felt himself, and he said, "You're gonna know who I am." And then a lot of information started to circulate of what the potential identity of this guy was. That's one. And we learned this in, I think it was late 2022 or early 2023. It was when the National Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association got together. The information ended up getting leaked, and then about 2 days later, they confirmed it. And in that meeting, remember, this is either late 2022 or early 2023, we had a number of people that continued to come after that. But during that time, they had already identified 2 million tier 1 threats. Yeah, that's the guy. That's the one right there.
By the way, if you are smart enough, you would know who I am. But you are really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're gonna know who I am. You're gonna know who I am. Very easy.
Wow, very easy. The entitlement.
No, believe me, I'm much better than that.
Okay. And I break it down of who I believe this actually is. And NLR, who we believed was dead. And there's actually a composite face match to him.
Wow.
Who was an American who was believed to have been killed in the Middle East by Americans. And there was a big controversy over this. But this guy came over the border during the Biden administration, 2021, 2022, and he is in the United States.
Yeah, we were all warning about this. But, I don't know how it got to the point where they're allowed that to go to that level. But now cleanup, like you talked about, once they come in, like Fallujah or something like that, once they get a hold, it's like it takes years to get them out. And so I've said that we're going to have cities that are going to be devastated. I said this over 5 years ago, and that's the only way you get them out. You have to destroy the city to remove them.
Unfortunately,
it's gonna be wild. Just to put it in perspective for people that can picture what 2 million tier 1 threats looks like, is if you go to the height of the war in Iraq, the most American troops we ever had on Iraqi soil at one time was just under 300,000. And if you remember looking at the graphics on the map, you're like, man, we have troops everywhere. That was less than 300,000. Imagine 2 million. And like I said, that number has probably since grown, because at the latest, that was early 2023. Imagine 2 million. And here's the thing. We saw a slight influx in social services, but not enough to match the demand of the amount of people that came through. So that means one of two things happened. Either they lied to us about the amount of people that came across the border, or the people that came across the border already had funding and financing ready for them.
Wow. So you've had almost a collapse of the food system because the bees, the spraying of the chemtrails, and 5G and all that stuff. I had a guy on talking today about how that can be reversed, but still we have some serious issues going on with our crops and food supply. The economy is right on the verge of collapsing. It's very, very close. What are you guys' thoughts on the way things go with economy, the food, and so forth? And President Trump even said, I think a couple of days ago, have a couple weeks of worth of food around.
Yeah. It's one thing that I cover all the time. And so when I built out the idea behind the Firestorm, it was kind of a conglomeration of a color revolution fitted in with the Bolshevik revolution, kind of the stages that they went through. And so what you see social and cultural destabilization. You see political and institutional infiltration. But above that layer, you see control of the supply chain, and you see the attacks on the infrastructure. And if we go back to the Biden administration, you remember when we were reporting on it, over 239 food processing and manufacturing facilities in the United States were set on fire and destroyed during the Biden administration. We got to remember that there was a tax on infrastructure, right? And so we had that. But all of this is set up because when you have the institutional infiltration, the societal and cultural collapse, and then you have the attacks on infrastructure and supply chain, you have global economic collapse. You have World War III that gets promulgated out of this. And right now we have what I would call a liquidity crisis. And we actually just saw an example of this the other day when the Japanese bond rate skyrocketed from near 0 to almost 5%. You saw Bitcoin just drop down from 110,000 almost to 87 to 86,000. You saw S&P 500 drop 500 points. You see all these other stocks dropping. And the reason that is because large institutions don't use their own money to buy Bitcoin and stocks. They use borrowed money. They use the derivatives market. So what they do is they'll go out there and take Japanese bonds, and since they're so stable, they'll use them as collateral to go out there and borrow money on margin, and then they'll go buy Bitcoin. And from the Bitcoin, they'll go buy U.S. tech stocks. So when the bond rate skyrockets up, you get a liquidity crisis to where they got a call on their carry trade, and now they have to liquidate their assets, and you get these global assets begin to decline. And so one thing that we have to understand is that, probably 60 to 70% of the global markets are nothing more than credit. They're marginalized systems. They're credit borrowed on margin, and there's not enough liquid assets to back it up, which means that we are literally one day away. Anytime that those bankers want to pull the rug, they can pull it, just like they did in 1929 to buy everything back up the next day on the bottom of the market and put the U.S. into bankruptcy. They can immediately do that again. And this is why we got to get rid of the Fed system. This is why we got to go to alternative, decentralized, parallel systems, right? But it's very plausible. And Michael, I'll tell you that if the Insurrection Act happens, if Donald Trump makes the moves that we hope he does, you are going to see an economic reaction, probably like we haven't seen since 2020 and COVID.
I agree.
And part of that's because of the way the deep state designed it. Yeah. And me and Josh were talking about this. They designed it to, if you try to destroy it, you collapse the regular operating economy because they intertwined them. And this was a defense measure in the way they did it. So if you try to take down the way we finance our operations and all that, you're going to destroy all of the economy. So it's something
the
that
dark money channels. If you take down the illicit, so if you take down the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, and the arms trafficking networks of illicit money, you take down the actual economy because they're directly tied into each other. Because you have the trillions of dollars of dark money that's flowing from illicit crime into the financial institutions as usable capital, which is then going and getting invested into the economy. And so if you start to take out these large human trafficking cartels and drug trafficking and arms trafficking cartels, you actually collapse the global economy. And they've integrated this together.
And I think Trump was aware of that. And I think that's why, and we've talked about this so many times as well, Trump created something I don't think that they were accounting for. And I think that's why he's weaponized tariffs as a way of making sure that, this is the backup chute. And then when you look at the resources being the way that we can finance in a sovereign wealth fund, and I know Josh has talked about that at length, I think these were the different instruments that Trump had ready, knowing what was going to happen when this system finally got exposed. And I think we're very close to that.
Incredible. All right, gents, what an absolutely incredible show. I know you guys go for hours. That I would love to keep you here for hours, but I know you got other stuff going on. But tell us a little bit about your other work and how people can reach you.
Yeah, you want to go first, Josh?
Yeah. Number one, X right there, Real Joshua Reid. You can find me there. My Substack, Red Pill Project, .substack.com, or my website, Red Pills, REDPILLS.TV. Best places to find me. The work that I have, I do the Daily Dose podcast on my channels Monday through Friday. I do DEFCON 0 on Tuesday nights, Q After Hours on Sunday nights on Badland Media. I'm very active on Substack and X, so the best places to find me.
Absolutely, yeah. AlphaWarrior.tv. You'll find all the main stuff. Obviously, you can find me and Josh doing DEFCON and Q After Hours over there on Badlands. And we'll give your guys, your audience, Mike, a little exclusive here. A new show coming down the pipeline, folks. We don't have any time, but we found a way to fit something where there is no time. And so look for probably around the beginning of the year, a new show, Black Box Conspiracies, and big plans for that.
Very nice. Yeah, you guys are you gents are taking it to the next level. So so honored and appreciative of your work, and I've seen you guys start and you've gone to the moon, Unbelievable. Good job. And
I would like to share one thing with you, Mike, and your audience. I want to say I'm very grateful and thank you. And for the audience that's been following Mike for quite some time, you'll know he was one of the first people that gave me a story when the corrupt, tyrannical government was trying to bury me. And when Mike brought me on the show, a lot of people don't know, but I had less than $80 in my bank account. I did not know where I was going to get grocery money. I was stressed out. I was like, how am I going to pay for the internet? Well, who cares? It was food, $82. And you brought me on the show, and your audience donated thousands of dollars in a very short window and allowed us to pay people back, get some grocery stuff. Like I am where I'm at because of people like you, Mike, people like your audience, that at the beginning, when no one knew my name, no one knew my face, I was just the guy with a story. And it was, podcasts like yours and Scott and Nino's and others that brought me on and gave me an opportunity. I would not be here, and I would not have the opportunity to do what I'm doing right now if someone like you did take a chance on my story in the beginning. So me and my family are very grateful for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, we love you guys. And so thanks so much for what you do. And
appreciate you.
Yeah. And I know my audience loves you. So, and they're going to be very excited to watch this, those that didn't yet. So